Award-winning futurist researcher and keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joins us on Canada Now for his weekly visit. Nick, this week we look at civilian space travel as we now know who the first all-civilian space crew will be made up of.
It's kind of interesting, hey, Jeff, the Inspiration 4 SpaceX mission that's hopefully going to happen by September or the end of September. You know, you got this, obviously the billionaire that's reserved it, and he's got these extra people that are sort of, he feels are deserved to come along. Also, one of them's got a prosthetic, I think prosthetic arm.
Yeah, something like that.
I think prosthetic arm. Yeah, and who's a 29-year-old cancer survivor, and she's going to be the chief medical officer because she's a physician's assistant, whatever. I don't know. I guess someone to put Band-Aids on the crew if they nick themselves, right? Anything else is going to be beyond help, maybe. But it's kind of interesting, right? It's like suddenly no astronauts in there. You know, remote help. They're going to be trained. They're going to be put in. And this is kind of really interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of, you know, quote unquote civilian space travel all the way from like 2001 with Soyuz in the International Space Station as well. But this is kind of like, can we make this an actual commercial proposition? So that's what's interesting about it.
Couldn't there have been one astronaut on board? I mean, you take the bus, there's a bus driver. You take the train, there's a conductor. You take a plane, there's two pilots. There couldn't be one astronaut on board?
Well, I don't know. I guess the billionaire is going to pretend to be one. It's it's cool. I'm only joking, partially joking. Yeah. I've met astronauts. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Commander Chris Hadfield a couple of times. He's awesome. Like, go and see him speak if you can go and see him speak. He's a really fabulous guy and very, very talented. You know, astronauts have had to be really highly skilled, incredibly disciplined, very sort of calm. I imagine that sort of psychological state of mind must have been sort of checked out in all of these people as well, you know, because you can't have people suddenly freaking out or canceling a mission because like some kind of like, I feel anxious or whatever, right? Because that can cost millions of dollars,
Sure.
right? So it's kind of interesting. They haven't said how they've chosen the people in terms of what were the qualifying sort of psychological, physical attributes. But, you know, they've landed on this group of people. And I think it's interesting because there's a big sort of movement and discussion around, you know, making space tourism happen, right?
Yeah, and we'll get into that, and that's going to happen because of what I believe is a real game changer here. Like, look at what Inspiration 4 organizers have said. They said, quote, all crew members will undergo commercial astronaut training by SpaceX on the Falcon 9 launch vehicle and Dragon spacecraft, the very same Dragon spacecraft currently attached to the International Space Station supporting the Crew 1 mission. Once Dragon returns the Crew 1 astronauts back home to Earth, the SpaceX team will inspect and refurbish the spacecraft ahead of the Inspiration 4 mission. We've talked about this before in the future of space travel. It's getting these spacecrafts, you know, cleaning them up, get a vacuum in there, Windex the windows, and put it back out there.
Yeah, send it out. Make sure that it's all together. You know, this is super exciting. I think it gets really exciting, and we've spoken about this before. When there ends up being more than the International Space Station. Actually, last week, a friend of mine from NASA who lives in Toronto, shout out to Ben Feist. He basically said, "Look above you. The International Space Station is going to be there in 5 minutes." And I ran up to my balcony at the top, and you could see it. It was a long way away. Was it 17 kilometers a second or something like that?
Yeah.
It was absolutely. It's wild, man.
Yeah.
Like having seen you can see that from Earth, and I don't know. This is like, you know, humans crave experience. They crave to go further. Go deeper in the ocean, go higher in the air, go to the most extreme places. Space just holds that special magic, right? The science fiction has created this idea of mystique and wonder that's out in outer space. But ultimately, it's an incredibly brutal place to be, right?
Well, yeah. But, you know, some might want to stay there for an extended period of time. Axiom Space is building the first private space station where space tourists can potentially live in space for several days in the future. So not only can you travel in space, but you can hang out there for a while.
It sounds kind of cool, right? I mean, you can just see, the insufferable amount of YouTubers and influencers and billionaire rappers that are going to be up there, and I say all power to them. Take me with you. I think it'd be interesting. This is like a huge experiment. Any of these things are an experiment. So, putting people into space in these new sort of configurations where they're not really doing exercises and whatever. I just wonder if like someone's going to be so sort of, very sort of unimpressed by the experience, but just sort of is dragged along and sort of spends like 6 days in the space hotel, like whinging and sort of surfing Facebook or something, It's like the apathy. I wonder when the apathy kicks in of the experience. I think it'll be a while until we get there. But do you know what? We're suddenly going to have this club, the people that can do it and the people that can't. But really, to what end? I sort of wonder, to what end are we doing this? This is about pushing the boundaries. It gets interesting when we go and we set up settlements on places like the moon, and that's when it gets interesting. That's when civilian travel gets interesting, because it's like, I'm going to take a shuttle to the lunar base. The Artemis program's coming, and I'm a chef, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a scientist, or I'm a doctor. That's when it gets super interesting to me and civilians, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, it differs from what like Blue Origin is looking to do, looking to launch up to 6 civilians at a time into space for 11 minutes. And you only have to pay $200,000 at the very least to do something like that. You train for 2 days leading up to boarding, but that's very different versus spending an extended amount of time up there. You'd spend just 11 minutes. You're out in space for 11 minutes, and then you come back down.
Do you know what? I'd be really down for that.
That's something you would do?
Yeah, it's something I would do. $200,000 in my brain. I'm like, how can I, shall I release equity from the house secretly, not tell my partner? And it's like, yeah, I just need to go to Boca Raton or wherever, right? I'll be back in 3 days. And she's like, you were on the news last night. It's like, yeah, there's something I need to tell you about. It's like, that's our son's education fund. It's like, yeah, but 11 minutes,
11 minutes. I got to spend 11 minutes in space, and it only cost $200,000. Worth every penny.
It sounds like if you can really create some great content, you could turn that into a good gig,
Yeah. So in looking at what Inspiration 4 is going to do, this mission that would happen in September, at least that's the plan. What do you think about this? And again, the conversation lends itself to Elon Musk and his efforts, because when there was talk of this maybe a couple of years ago, it was like, oh, there's another pie in the sky idea by Elon Musk, and he's got many of them, and not all of them are going to happen, but some of them might. Right. And this is one of them. What about what Elon Musk has done, and how are we going to regard Elon Musk, say, 100 years from now?
He's going to be seen as a billionaire pioneer, the guy that funded a lot of advancement in space travel, commercial space travel. Really, landing. I think I've told you this story before. I cried when I saw a rocket land for the first time, because the energy was palpable. It was a National Geographic documentary, and it was like you could just feel like 400 people holding their breath whilst the rocket landed. When it landed, can you imagine? I've got this deep sense of empathy with those sorts of situations, and it's just like, wow. And honestly, like, Elon Musk's name is going to be hung on that achievement. But I kind of hope that all of the people that have sort of worked on it, they're recognized as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, is this the rocket you speak of? Is this the one? And I'm not knocking it. It sounds like I am. Is this the one that exploded like 8 minutes later that we talked about?
No. This was the one years ago. Like, so after, like, I think about 4 years, they hadn't landed one of the booster rockets.
I see. Yeah,
not that one.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't cry. Like, I'm over it now, Jeff. I don't get emotional now. No, but it was. I saw the one that landed, and I was like, my mind was blown. I was showing my little boy. He's only 8 months old, but like, come on, space.
Yeah.
And this was a few years ago, and I was sat at home. I think I had had a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness me. And I think it was just around the same time that I saw Chris Hadfield speak. And I was on stage before him. You know, how do you sort of set up an astronaut? You just get out of the way as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And he literally pointed at these rockets landing. And it was a few weeks after I watched it initially, I had the emotional sort of excitement. And he was like, this is when everything changes. You know, this is honestly, and it is. And it's like suddenly commercial space travel gets cheaper, like significantly, and then cargo, and then being able to take things to and from the moon and to and from Mars, maybe for some scientific sort of settlements, right? It's really exciting. The next 50 years in space exploration is going to be really exciting. I'm excited about the people that come after Elon Musk, right? I'm excited about the kids that are born today that are suddenly in 50 to 60 years going to be doing amazing things.
Oh, absolutely. In the meantime, check out NikolasBadminton.com. Futurist researcher, keynote speaker, Nick Badminton. Nick, we'll see you in space sometime. Thank you, sir.
Fly me to the moon, Jeff.